What happens when a woman builds a global empire only to have the two people she trusts most try to tear it down from the inside? We're talking about Catherine Delacroix, the genius behind a billion-dollar tech conglomerate. She gave her husband, Alistair Sterling, a life of unimaginable luxury and a powerful position in her company. She mentored a brilliant young woman, Isabella Rossi, raising her from an intern to a top executive. But when she discovered their ultimate betrayal, a sordid affair behind her back, the mistress had the audacity to whisper, "You can't stop us." What she didn't know was that Catherine Delacroix wasn't just a wife. She was a queen, and in her kingdom, she made all the rules. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about power. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was less a home and more a statement. Spanning 3 floors with panoramic views of Central Park, it was a testament to Catherine Delacroix's indomitable will. Every piece of art from the Rothko in the foyer to the Hepworth sculpture on the terrace was chosen by her. Every business deal that paid for it was negotiated by her. Catherine had not married into money. She had created it, spun it from the gossamer thread of a brilliant idea in a Silicon Valley garage 2 decades ago into the monolithic tapestry that was Delacroix Enterprises. Her husband, Alistair Sterling, was the perfect accessory to her empire. With his chiseled jaw, Savile Row suits, and a charm that could disarm world leaders, he was the public face of the company. He was the chairman, a title Catherine had bestowed upon him. He excelled at shaking hands, hosting galas, and delivering keynote speeches she had often helped him write. The world saw them as a power couple, a perfect fusion of intellect and charisma. But in the quiet, sterile expanse of their penthouse, the silence had grown cavernous. Their interactions had become a series of well-rehearsed transactions. A peck on the cheek before a flight to Tokyo, a shared knowing smile for the photographers at the Met Gala, a murmured "good night" across a king-sized bed that felt more like a continent. Catherine, a woman whose mind operated on logic data and strategy, had categorized this emotional distance as a natural byproduct of 2 demanding lives. A bug in the system, not a fatal crash. She was more focused on the upcoming launch of Helios, a revolutionary renewable energy project that was set to be the crowning jewel of her legacy. It was her passion, her obsession. She spent 18-hour days coordinating with engineering teams in Berlin, negotiating with government officials in Dubai, and personally overseeing the marketing strategy from her New York headquarters. It was during one of these late nights, poring over quarterly projections, that the first anomaly appeared. It wasn't in the numbers. It was a scent, a faint, cloying floral perfume on the lapel of the jacket Alistair had left slung over his office chair. It wasn't her scent. She wore a subtle, woody fragrance, Santal 33. This was something sweet, loud, and youthful. She dismissed it. A colleague at a luncheon, perhaps. A handshake that lingered too long. A simple, logical explanation. But anomalies, Catherine knew, were often the first sign of a systemic flaw. A few days later, another one surfaced. Alistair's corporate expense report. He was meticulous almost to a fault, but this report included a charge for a suite at the Baccarat Hotel on a night he was supposed to be at a tech conference in Boston. The conference had ended a day early due to a storm, he had told her. He'd driven back and spent the night at their Greenwich estate to avoid the city traffic. A quick, discreet call to the Greenwich estate manager confirmed the truth. The house had been empty that night. The sheets were cold. Catherine felt a sensation she hadn't experienced since her company's near bankruptcy in the early 2000s, a cold, sharp spike of adrenaline that was not born of excitement, but of dread. She stood on her terrace, the city lights of Manhattan glittering below like a fallen constellation. She had built this world, every shining tower, every glowing light. The thought that a foundational pillar of that world was rotten from the inside was not just painful, it was unacceptable. She did not cry. She did not scream. Catherine Delacroix was a strategist. When faced with a potential threat, she did not panic. She gathered data. And she had a feeling she knew exactly where the rot was festering. It was close. It was someone she had nurtured, someone she had trusted, someone who understood the architecture of her world almost as well as she did. Isabella Rossi was a supernova. She had joined Delacroix Enterprises 7 years ago as a bright-eyed intern with a degree from Wharton and an ambition that burned like a pilot light. Catherine had seen a reflection of her younger self in Isabella's ferocious intelligence and tireless work ethic. She took the young woman under her wing, mentoring her, promoting her, and shaping her into one of the most formidable executives in the tech industry. At 29, Isabella was the Senior Vice President of Global Strategy, a position she had earned, Catherine firmly believed, through merit. She was beautiful, yes, with raven hair, expressive brown eyes, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. But it was her mind that was truly captivating. She could dissect a market analysis with surgical precision and anticipate industry trends months before they happened. She was Catherine's heir apparent, the one person she trusted to help steer the company into the future. Catherine had championed her at every turn. When older male board members had questioned Isabella's rapid ascent, Catherine had defended her fiercely, presenting irrefutable evidence of her contributions. She had invited Isabella to private dinners at the penthouse, introduced her to her exclusive network, and treated her with a maternal affection that went beyond professional mentorship. Isabella had in turn professed unwavering loyalty and admiration. "You're my inspiration, Catherine." She'd say, her eyes shining with what appeared to be genuine reverence. "Everything I know, I learned from you." Now that memory felt like a shard of glass in Catherine's mind. The perfume. It was Flower Bomb by Victor and Rolf. Isabella wore it. Catherine had even complimented her on it once, a casual remark in an elevator that now felt like a grotesque irony. The pieces began to click into place with the cold, horrifying certainty of a mathematical proof. The late-night strategy sessions Isabella and Alistair had been having. The way Alistair, who had initially been dismissive of Isabella's ideas, had suddenly become her biggest advocate in board meetings. The shared glances during presentations, the inside jokes Catherine wasn't privy to, the way they both lit up when the other entered a room. Catherine had interpreted it as a successful executive partnership she had fostered. She had seen it as a testament to her good judgment. The reality was a humiliation of an entirely different magnitude. They hadn't just gone behind her back. They had done it in her house, in her company, using the very power and proximity she had given them. To confirm her theory, she needed more than a hunch. Crying to Alistair or confronting Isabella would be emotional, messy, and beneath her. It would give them the upper hand. Power, Catherine knew, was not about emotion. It was about information and control. She bypassed the company's standard IT security department. They were good, but they were loyal to the company structure of which Alistair was chairman. She needed absolute discretion. She made a single call to a man named Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a ghost, a legend in the cybersecurity world, whom Catherine had headhunted a decade ago, and now kept on a highly private retainer for her most sensitive projects. He didn't have an official title. His office was a server farm in a nondescript building in Queens. His only loyalty was to Catherine and the 7-figure salary she paid him directly. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady and devoid of emotion. I have a delicate internal matter. I need a complete communications and financial audit on 2 senior executives, Alistair Sterling and Isabella Rossi. I want everything: encrypted messages, deleted emails, location data, offshore accounts, everything. And Marcus? She added, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. No one can know you're looking, not even God. Consider it done, Ms. Delacroix, came the clipped reply. As she hung up, Catherine looked at a framed photo on her desk. It was of her and Alistair at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the company's London headquarters. Beside it was another photo of her and Isabella at a Women in Tech awards ceremony, both of them holding trophies, smiling. The 2 people who were supposed to be her greatest allies. The serpent wasn't just in the garden. She had invited it in, fed it, and taught it where to bite. For 3 days, Catherine operated as if nothing was wrong. She led the Helios project meeting with her usual incisive authority, dismantled a flawed logistics proposal from the European team, and had a perfectly cordial dinner with Alistair, where they discussed the wine auction for the Philharmonic. It was a masterful performance. Inside, however, a glacial calm had settled over her. The hurt was there, a deep tectonic ache, but she had walled it off behind a dam of pure, cold fury. Emotion was a liability. She was in mission mode. On the 4th day, Marcus Thorne sent a single encrypted message. Package ready for delivery. Your eyes only. An hour later, he arrived at the penthouse, not through the grand lobby, but via the private service elevator, carrying a sleek titanium briefcase. He was a small, unassuming man in his 40s, with thinning hair and glasses that seemed permanently perched on the end of his nose. He looked more like an accountant than a cybernetic bloodhound. Ms. Delacroix, he said, with a nod, placing the briefcase on the solid oak table in her study. He opened it to reveal a single encrypted tablet. It's all there. Everything you asked for, and more. The highlights, Marcus, Catherine said, her voice low. Marcus swiped the screen to life. The affair began approximately 18 months ago. It escalated 6 months ago. They have not been particularly clever, just arrogant. They used company-issued devices, believing the standard encryptions would be enough. He brought up a string of messages. They were sickeningly juvenile. Pet names: My Lion for Alistair, My Starlight for Isabella. Emojis, plans for clandestine meetings disguised as business trips, but then the content grew more serious. They're not just sleeping together, Marcus explained, his tone clinical. They're conspiring. He showed her emails where Isabella fed Alistair proprietary data from her department to bolster his position on projects he was championing, effectively undermining other VPs. There were financial records. Alistair had used a shell corporation funded through a discretionary company account Catherine had given him access to purchase a condo in Tribeca. The deed was in Isabella's name. It was a $5 million gift. That's a breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation of company funds, Catherine stated, her voice flat. It gets worse, Marcus said. He pulled up a voice memo recovered from a deleted cloud backup on Isabella's phone. Her voice was clear, confident, and laced with a smug intimacy. Don't worry about Catherine, my love, Isabella was saying. She's too busy playing with her solar panels. She doesn't see what's right in front of her. By the time Helios launches, we'll have enough board allies to propose a restructuring. We can position you as CEO and I'll be your COO. She built the ship Alistair, but we can steer it. It's our time. Catherine felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't just an affair. This was a coup. A pathetic, ill-conceived, but nonetheless venomous attempt to seize the empire she had bled for. They didn't just want each other. They wanted her life, her legacy, her throne. The final piece of evidence was the most personal blow. Marcus displayed a receipt from a private jeweler on Madison Avenue. Alistair had purchased a necklace. It was a custom piece, a single flawless canary diamond suspended on a platinum chain. The cost was astronomical, but it was the design that made Catherine's blood run cold. It was an almost identical replica of the Delacroix family heirloom, a necklace given to Catherine by her own grandmother, which she wore only on the most special occasions. He had taken something precious, something that signified her heritage, and cheapened it, duplicated it for his mistress. Marcus watched her, his expression unreadable. "What are your orders, Miss Delacroix?" Catherine stared out the window at the setting sun, which painted the sky in brutal streaks of orange and purple. For a moment, the woman gave way to the wife. A profound sense of betrayal washed over her, so potent it was almost dizzying. This was the man she had loved, the man whose potential she had believed in, the man she had made a king. This was the woman she had mentored, the woman she had seen as a daughter. Then the moment passed. The CEO returned. "Prepare a complete, unassailable dossier, Marcus," she said, her voice now hard as forged steel. "Redact nothing. Detail every financial misstep, every data breach, every instance of corporate espionage. Have it ready for presentation, and loop in Eleanor Vance from legal. Tell her to expect my call and to clear her schedule for the rest of the week." Eleanor Vance was the most feared corporate lawyer in New York. Hiring her was like launching a nuclear weapon. "And Marcus," Catherine added, turning to face him, her eyes dark with resolve. "Secure our servers, everything. I want Alistair Sterling and Isabella Rossi locked out of every file, every email, every system effective on my command. I want them to be ghosts within the machine." "When will that be?" he asked. Catherine allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Oh, I think I'll let them precipitate the event themselves. Arrogance always provides its own rope." The opportunity presented itself 2 days later. Catherine had requested that Isabella meet her in her private study at the penthouse to go over the final marketing projections for the Helios launch. It was a plausible request, a meeting they had had a dozen times before. But this time the context was entirely different. Catherine had chosen the location deliberately. Not the sterile, neutral ground of the office boardroom, but her inner sanctum, her seat of power. The study was a cathedral of knowledge and control, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a large mahogany desk, and a commanding view of the city. It was a room that intimidated even the most powerful men. Isabella arrived precisely on time, dressed in a sharp crimson dress that was both professional and alluring. She carried a tablet and wore a smile that was bright, confident, and utterly false. "Catherine, good evening," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I have the revised numbers. The engagement metrics are even better than we projected." Catherine didn't look at the tablet. She remained seated behind her desk, steepling her fingers, and simply watched Isabella for a long moment. She observed the canary diamond necklace sparkling at Isabella's throat, the crude copy of her grandmother's legacy. Isabella, catching her gaze subconsciously, touched it, a small, triumphant gesture. "Isabella." Catherine began, her tone quiet and even. "We need to discuss a matter of corporate restructuring." Isabella's smile tightened slightly. This was it. The conversation she and Alistair had fantasized about. She believed Catherine was finally going to offer her a C-suite position, perhaps even the COO title they had plotted to take. She thought she was winning. "Of course, Catherine. I have some ideas I've been developing with Alistair." "I'm sure you have." Catherine interrupted the politeness in her voice. so thin it was transparent. But before we get to that, I want to talk about loyalty. What does that word mean to you? Isabella was momentarily thrown, but she recovered quickly. It means everything. My loyalty is to this company, and to you, Catherine. You know that. You gave me my start. I owe my entire career to you. The hypocrisy was so blatant, it was almost breathtaking. Catherine let the silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. She saw a flicker of unease in Isabella's eyes. "That's interesting," Catherine said finally. "Because my definition of loyalty doesn't include conspiring with my husband to usurp my position, using company funds to finance a personal lifestyle, or stealing proprietary data to advance a lover's agenda." The color drained from Isabella's face. The confident smile vanished, replaced by a mask of shocked indignation. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, please, Isabella." Catherine sighed, a flicker of genuine weariness in her voice. "Don't insult my intelligence. Don't insult the woman who taught you how to read a balance sheet and a boardroom. I know about the condo in Tribeca. I know about the Shell Corporation. I know about your plans for a restructuring. I know everything." Isabella's panic quickly morphed into a hard, defiant anger. The mask was off. This was the real woman beneath the polished exterior, a cornered animal ready to bite. Her fear was being replaced by the arrogance Catherine knew was her fatal flaw. She believed Alistair's love and perceived power were her shield. "So you know," Isabella sneered, her voice dropping into a venomous whisper. She took a step closer to the desk, her posture oozing defiance. "And what are you going to do about it?" "Catherine, tell everyone. Expose Alistair, the charming chairman of your company, the man whose face is on the cover of Forbes, next to yours. Humiliate yourself. The world thinks you two are a team. If you take him down, you damage the brand. You damage yourself." She leaned forward, her hands on the polished mahogany of the desk, her face inches from Catherine's. "Alistair loves me." She hissed the words, a declaration of war. "He's tired of living in your shadow. He wants a real partner, not a CEO he has to call his wife. We are the future of this company. We are inevitable." And then she delivered the fatal line, the words that would seal her fate. "You can't stop us." Catherine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked into the eyes of the young woman she had once cherished and saw nothing but a hollow ambition. A profound, almost serene calm washed over her. It was the calm of a general who sees the enemy walk directly into a perfectly laid trap. A small, slow smile touched Catherine Delacroix's lips. It was not a smile of warmth or amusement. It was a smile of utter, absolute finality. A smile that said, "Checkmate." "You're right," Catherine said softly, the smile never leaving her face. "I can't stop you and Alistair from being together." She paused, letting Isabella savor her perceived victory for one fleeting second. "But I can and I will fire you both." Isabella stared, her mind struggling to process Catherine's words. The sheer calm certainty with which they were delivered was more unsettling than any shouting match would have been. "Fire us!" Isabella laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You can't fire Alistair. He's the chairman. He's on the board, and I am the senior VP of Global Strategy with a watertight contract. The board would never allow it. The stockholders would revolt." Catherine's smile widened slightly. "You still think you're playing a game of emotions, Isabella. This has moved beyond that. This is now a matter of corporate governance." With a tap on her keyboard, the large screen behind Catherine's desk, normally displaying market tickers, flickered to life. It showed the Delacroix Enterprises corporate logo, followed by the words, Emergency board meeting. In session. Isabella's blood ran cold. What is this? This, Catherine said, gesturing to the screen, is a virtual meeting with the board of directors, which I convened an hour ago. They have been listening to our entire conversation. On the screen, a series of video windows popped into view, one by one. There was Harrison Ford, the stoic ex-senator. There was Kenji Tanaka, the Japanese tech mogul. There was Beatrice Vanderbilt, the matriarch of an old money dynasty. All of them the powerful figures Isabella and Alistair had been trying to woo, stared out with grim, unreadable expressions. Under Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Delacroix Enterprises bylaws. Catherine continued, her voice resonating with the authority of a judge delivering a verdict. I, as the founder and majority shareholder, have the right to call an emergency session to address any matter that poses a clear and present danger to the company's integrity and financial stability. She tapped another key. The screen now displayed Marcus Thorne's dossier, a scrolling nightmare of evidence. Bank statements from the Shell Corporation, the deed to the Tribeca condo, encrypted emails detailing their plot for the coup verbatim, a detailed analysis of Isabella's data, breaches quantifying the potential financial damage in the tens of millions. As you can see, esteemed members of the board, Catherine addressed the screen, her voice crisp and professional. This is not a personal dispute. This is a documented case of gross misconduct. Mr. Alistair Sterling, our chairman, has engaged in the misappropriation of company funds for personal use, a direct breach of his fiduciary duty. Ms. Isabella Rossi has been found to be systematically leaking proprietary data and conspiring to manipulate the company's leadership structure for personal gain, an act of corporate espionage. Isabella was speechless, white as a sheet. She had walked in ready for a domestic drama. She had found herself the star defendant in a corporate trial. Catherine turned her cool gaze back to Isabella. Your contract, Isabella. It contains a morality clause and a clause for immediate termination in cases of gross misconduct. I should know. I wrote it myself. As for Alistair, she said, a flicker of something almost like pity in her eyes. His position as chairman is granted by the board, a position he holds at their and my discretion. He serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder. She looked back at the screen. I now put forth two motions. Motion 1, the immediate termination of employment for Miss Isabella Rossi on the grounds of gross misconduct and breach of contract. All in favor, siete. One by one, the words AYE appeared under each board member's window. It was unanimous. Motion 2. Catherine continued, her voice unwavering. A vote of no confidence in Chairman Alistair Sterling and his immediate removal from the board and termination of all duties related to Delacroix Enterprises. All in favor. Again the screen filled with AWE, unanimous. Catherine swiveled her chair back to face the crumbling figure of Isabella Rossi. The board has spoken, she said softly. As of this moment, your keycard will not work. Your corporate accounts are frozen. Your access to all company servers has been revoked. The same applies to Alistair, who I believe is currently enjoying a drink at the Polo Bar, waiting for your triumphant call. Security will now escort you from the building. You will be allowed to collect your personal belongings from your office under supervision at a later scheduled time. As if on cue, two large, stone-faced men in dark suits entered the study. They were part of Catherine's personal security detail, not the regular office guards. Isabella finally found her voice, a choked, desperate whisper. You bitch! Catherine simply nodded, a gesture of dismissal. You learned from me, Isabella. You just didn't learn enough. You learned strategy, but not endgame. You learned ambition, but not wisdom. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a legacy to protect." The security guards gently but firmly took Isabella by the arm. As they led her out, a broken, sobbing mess, Catherine made one final call, not to a lawyer, not to a board member, but to the head of PR. "Jessica," she said calmly, "we need to draft a press release. Delacroix Enterprises is announcing a leadership restructuring. Alistair Sterling and Isabella Rossi are no longer with the company effective immediately. We thank them for their service and wish them well in their future endeavors." She hung up, leaned back in her chair, and for the first time in 3 days allowed herself to feel the full weight of the moment. There was no triumph, no joy, just the cold, grim satisfaction of a surgeon who has just completed a radical, painful, but necessary amputation to save the patient's life. The patient in this case was her empire. The news hit the financial world like a seismic shock. "Sterling and Rossi abruptly exit Delacroix." "Enterprises," screamed the headline on the Wall Street Journal's homepage. The official press release was a masterpiece of corporate ambiguity, a bland statement that only fueled more frantic speculation. Was it a power struggle, a failed project, a prelude to a merger? No one knew the truth, and Catherine's ironclad control of the narrative ensured it would stay that way. Alistair discovered his fate not from Catherine, but from his phone. He was as Catherine predicted, at the polo bar, swirling a glass of Macallan 25, when a flurry of notifications lit up his screen. His corporate credit card was declined. His company email pinged back, an "account disabled" error. Then came the call from a panicked board member, a supposed ally who stammered, "Alistair, what the hell happened? The vote was unanimous. We had no choice." His blood turned to ice. He raced out of the bar, leaving his drink untouched, and tried to call Catherine. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried Isabella. Straight to voicemail. He sped to the office, a building that had his name emblazoned on it, next to Catherine's, only to be stopped at the security gate by guards who looked at him with polite but firm impassivity. His access had been revoked. He finally reached Isabella, who was sobbing hysterically from a taxi. Between panicked gasps, she recounted the scene in Catherine's study, the board meeting the dossier, the final cold dismissal. Alistair's shock curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. He felt emasculated, discarded. For years he had chafed under the title of Mr. Delacroix. He had convinced himself that his charm, his networking, his public persona were as crucial to the company's success as Catherine's genius. He and Isabella had painted a picture for themselves, where Catherine was the past, and they were the future. In the space of 30 minutes, Catherine had reminded him that he was nothing more than an employee, a highly paid one, but an employee nonetheless in the house that she built. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, their corporate assets were frozen. Their company cars were reclaimed. The locks on the Tribeca condo were changed, as it was now evidence in a pending corporate lawsuit for the recovery of misappropriated funds. They were pariahs. The same colleagues who had laughed at their jokes and sought their favor now averted their eyes and ignored their calls. They were radioactive. While they were scrambling, Catherine was moving. She addressed her senior leadership in a company-wide video conference. She didn't mention the affair. She spoke of a divergence in strategic vision and the need for renewed focus and unwavering ethical standards. She announced she would be temporarily assuming the role of chairman in addition to her CEO duties. Her demeanor was calm, controlled, and inspiring. She wasn't a woman scorned. She was a leader securing her ship in a storm. The message was clear. The Queen was firmly on her throne, and the court was in order. That night alone, in the cavernous penthouse, the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of emotional distance, but the silence of solitude. The side of the closet that held Alistair's suits was empty. His books were gone from the nightstand. There was a hollow space where his presence used to be. Catherine walked out onto the terrace, a glass of wine in her hand, and looked down at the city she had conquered. For a moment, the weight of her choice settled on her. She had lost her husband and the woman she'd viewed as a successor. She had surgically excised a part of her own life. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, a solitary acknowledgement of the personal cost of this victory. She wiped it away, her jaw set. Grief was a luxury she would allow herself later, for now there was only the empire, and it was hers alone. But as she stood there believing the worst was over, she had underestimated one thing, the desperation of a man who has lost everything. Alistair was not just a charming fool, he was a cornered, vengeful fool. And he believed he had one last card to play. An ace in the hole he thought could burn Catherine's entire empire to the ground. A week after the firing, Eleanor Vance, Catherine's formidable lawyer, sat in the penthouse study. Piles of documents were neatly stacked on the desk. The divorce proceedings are straightforward. Catherine Holton sets. Eleanor said, her voice sharp and precise. The prenuptial agreement you had me draft is iron. He gets the Greenwich estate, which was in his family's name, the art he personally owned before the marriage, and a one-time settlement of $10 million. In exchange, he forfeits any and all claims to Delacroix Enterprises and its assets. It's airtight. He won't accept it, Catherine stated, not as a question, but as a fact. $10 million is an insult to him. He's used to a billionaire's lifestyle. He has no choice, Eleanor countered. He's legally bound. Alistair isn't thinking legally, Catherine replied. He's thinking vindictively. Her words were prophetic. The next day, Eleanor received a call from Alistair's new lawyer, a notorious pit bull known for scorched earth tactics. The offer was simple and laced with blackmail. Alistair would not sign the divorce papers. Instead, he demanded a 50% stake in Catherine's personal holdings in Delacroix Enterprises, a sum worth billions, and a public apology. If she refused, he was prepared to leak the contents of a private server he had maintained for years. His lawyer called it the Archangel file. According to the threat, the server contained documents, emails, and recorded conversations from Catherine's early days, the ruthless take-no-prisoners era of her ascent. It allegedly held proof of hostile takeovers that bordered on market manipulation, aggressive tactics used to crush smaller competitors, and confidential deals that, if exposed, could trigger SEC investigations and shareholder lawsuits that would cripple the company. It was, in essence, a chronicle of how the sausage was made, and Alistair was threatening to show the world the grisly details. He claims he has everything. Eleanor reported to Catherine, her face grim. He says he can paint you as a corporate predator, decimate your public image, and bury the company in legal battles for the next decade. He's betting that you'll pay anything to keep this buried. This was the twist Catherine hadn't seen coming. While she had been building an empire, her husband had been quietly building her coffin. It was a betrayal far deeper than infidelity. He had been collecting ammunition against her for years, perhaps as a form of insurance, a way to feel powerful in a relationship where he held so little true leverage. Isabella, now his partner in exile, was pushing him. Her career was in ruins, her name tarnished. Vengeance was all she had left. They saw this not just as a way to get rich, but as a way to destroy the woman who had cast them out. For the first time since the ordeal began, Catherine felt a sliver of genuine fear. Alistair was not wrong. Her rise to the top had not been a gentle one. She had been aggressive, relentless. While she had always operated within the bounds of the law, her lawyers had often needed to be creative. A public airing of her most ruthless strategies could be devastating. The media would have a field day. The market would panic. The pressure was immense. The board, while loyal, was nervous. Her PR team was in crisis mode. Eleanor Vance advised caution, suggesting a negotiation might be the wisest course. Alistair and Isabella, holed up in the Greenwich estate, felt the tide turning. They were euphoric, believing they had finally found Catherine's weakness. They had her cornered. They imagined her alone in that sterile penthouse, panicking, ready to surrender. They imagined wrong. Catherine called Marcus Thorne. "Marcus," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "Alistair is threatening to release something he calls the Archangel file. It's a private server containing sensitive historical data." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus spoke his voice, holding a note of something Catherine had never heard from him before: amusement. "The Archangel file," he repeated. "Yes, Ms. Delacroix. I've been aware of its existence for 5 years." Catherine sat perfectly still, the phone pressed to her ear. "Explain, Marcus." "About 5 years ago, during a routine security sweep of your personal network, I detected an unauthorized data siphon," Marcus explained calmly. "It was sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough. It was routing copies of select files to an encrypted off-site server. I traced its origin. It was coming from Mr. Sterling's personal laptop." Catherine's mind reeled. For 5 years, Alistair had been secretly copying her files, building his arsenal. And for 5 years, Marcus had known. "Why wasn't I informed?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Because my directive has always been to protect you and the company from all threats, both external and internal," Marcus replied. A direct confrontation at the time would have created a messy domestic situation with unpredictable consequences. So I chose a different strategy: mitigation and control. He continued. "I didn't block his access. That would have alerted him. Instead, I rerouted the siphon through a quarantine server of my own. For the past 5 years, every file Mr. Sterling thought he was stealing was first filtered by me. I allowed him to take anything that was either publicly available or damaging only to himself. But anything truly sensitive, deal memos, confidential legal opinions, proprietary algorithms, I scrubbed or replaced with corrupted, unusable data. In short, Ms. Delacroix, his Archangel file, is a digital ghost. It looks real, but it's filled with junk data dead ends, and a few items that, if released, would incriminate him in several minor insider trading violations he committed a few years back." The silence in the study was absolute. Alistair's ultimate weapon, his great failsafe, was a dud, a trap that Marcus, her silent guardian, had set 5 years ago. Catherine had been playing chess, but Marcus had been watching over the entire board, ensuring the game was always rigged in her favor. A slow, genuine smile spread across Catherine's face. It was a smile of relief, of vindication, of sheer, unadulterated power. "So his gun is loaded with blanks," she murmured. "Worse," Marcus said. "It's rigged to backfire." The endgame was swift. Catherine instructed Eleanor Vance to respond to Alistair's lawyer. She rejected the blackmail demand in its entirety. She would not pay a single cent more than the prenup stipulated. Alistair, blinded by arrogance, was furious. "Fine," he screamed at his lawyer. "Burn her, leak it all." And he did. He gave the Archangel file to a notoriously aggressive online journalist. The story broke the next morning with a sensational headline: "The Secret Files of Catherine Delacroix, an Empire Built on Lies." The world held its breath. The company's stock dipped in pre-market trading. Then the truth came out. The damning documents were nothing. The files were corrupted. The recorded conversations were out of context or benign. The only concrete evidence the journalist could find was a trail of emails that strongly implicated Alistair in passing on non-public information about a competitor. Delacroix was about to acquire a clear case for an SEC investigation. Within hours, the narrative flipped. Catherine Delacroix wasn't the villain. She was the victim of a malicious, pathetic smear campaign by her vengeful ex-husband. Delacroix Enterprises released a statement condemning the cowardly and illegal release of doctored documents and announced they were cooperating fully with the SEC's investigation into Alistair Sterling. It was a public execution. Alistair's reputation was not just ruined, it was annihilated. He was no longer the charming, wronged husband. He was a failed blackmailer and a potential felon. Isabella Rossi, his co-conspirator, was dragged down with him, her name becoming a footnote in his spectacular downfall. Alistair was forced to sign the original divorce papers. The $10 million settlement was immediately put into a trust to cover his impending legal fees. The Greenwich estate was sold to cover his debts. He and Isabella vanished from the public eye, their grand ambitions reduced to tabloid fodder and legal depositions. 2 months later, Catherine stood on the stage at the global launch of the Helios project. The lights were bright, the applause was deafening. Delacroix Enterprises' stock was at an all-time high. She looked out at the sea of faces, employees, investors, journalists, and spoke of the future of innovation, of building a better world. She was alone, but she was not lonely. She was free. The last vestiges of a life that had been holding her back were gone. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but thrived. The mistress had said, "You can't stop us." But Catherine Delacroix had done more than stop them. She had erased them. She had proven that the empire didn't need a king. The queen was more than enough. 6 months after the Helios launch, the world saw Catherine Delacroix at her zenith. The project was an unprecedented success, revolutionizing the energy sector and adding another $10 billion to her company's valuation. She was the subject of laudatory profiles in Time, and The Economist hailed as the undisputed titan of technology, a visionary cloaked in Dior and armed with a will of iron. The messy affair and the subsequent corporate coup were now just a footnote in her meteoric story, a testament to her resilience. On the surface, everything was perfect. But inside the Park Avenue penthouse, the silence Alistair had left behind had been replaced by a different kind of quiet, the sterile, echoing quiet of a fortress. Catherine had won the war decisively and brilliantly, but she found the peacetime unsettling. Every victory in the boardroom felt muted. Every new success was a peak scaled alone. The trust she once placed in others, however selectively, had been vaporized. Now she saw potential threats in every corner, shadows of betrayal in every friendly smile. Her paranoia had become her closest advisor. She had Marcus Thorne conduct deep-level security sweeps on every single board member and C-suite executive. She read every email, analyzed every expense report, searching for the next anomaly, the next Alistair or Isabella waiting in the wings. Her empire was more secure than ever, but its queen was a prisoner within its walls. The first sign of a new, more subtle challenge came not with a bang, but with a polite, deferential email from Beatrice Vanderbilt. Beatrice, the silver-haired matriarch of the board, requested a private lunch at the Modern. Her reasoning was innocuous: to discuss the long-term governance structure and ensure continued market confidence. Catherine knew it was more than that. Beatrice was old money, a creature of institutions and established order. She had backed Catherine during the coup, because Alistair and Isabella's actions were a vulgar breach of conduct, but Catherine suspected that Beatrice was deeply uncomfortable with the sheer amount of power now consolidated in one person. Catherine was the CEO, the chairman, and the majority shareholder. In Beatrice's world, such unchecked authority was a sign of instability, not strength. At lunch, surrounded by minimalist art and the quiet clinking of cutlery, Beatrice made her move. "Catherine, your leadership has been nothing short of spectacular," she began, her tone gracious. "You have steered the ship through a hurricane and into record-breaking territory. The board and the shareholders are eternally grateful." "Thank you, Beatrice," Catherine said, her eyes watchful over the rim of her water glass. "Which is why we must protect that legacy." Beatrice continued smoothly. "The market has rewarded your decisive action, but markets are fickle. They value stability. They value checks and balances. The board feels that the time has come to separate the roles of CEO and chairman once more. To bring in an independent chairman to provide oversight and counsel, it would be a signal of strength of mature governance." It was a perfectly crafted corporate argument, delivered with a velvet glove. But to Catherine it felt like a slap. After she had single-handedly saved the company from a parasitic plot, they wanted to put a handler on her. They didn't trust her. And who did the board have in mind for this oversight role? Catherine asked, her voice dangerously soft. "We have a list of candidates," Beatrice said, sliding a discreet folder across the table. "Highly respected individuals, former CEOs, retired statesmen." Catherine glanced at the names. They were all men, all part of the same old boys network that Beatrice and Harrison Ford belonged to. They were establishment figures, men who would be predictable, manageable, and who would undoubtedly attempt to curb her more audacious ambitions. They wanted to put her in a gilded cage. "I see," Catherine said, closing the folder. "You feel I need a chaperone." "Of course not, my dear," Beatrice replied, her smile never faltering. "We feel the company needs a complete structure. You are a brilliant, once-in-a-generation visionary, but visionaries can sometimes benefit from a grounding force. Think of it not as a leash, but as an anchor." The Catherine of 6 months ago would have gone to war. She would have seen this as another coup, another betrayal. She would have used her majority stake to threaten the board, to force them into submission, to remind them who held the real power. But the lonely silence of the past few months had taught her something. Waging war, even when you win, leaves your kingdom scarred. Alistair's betrayal had been born of his own weakness, but she now recognized her part in it. She had given him a title, but no real power, creating a vacuum that his resentment had filled. She had absolute control, but she was utterly alone. Perhaps she considered an anchor wasn't the worst thing. The question was, who would hold the chain? She looked at Beatrice, the calm, confident matriarch, and made a decision. She would not fight their move. She would co-opt it. "You're right, Beatrice," Catherine said, surprising the older woman. "Strong governance is paramount. The roles should be separated." Beatrice looked momentarily stunned, her victory having come too easily. "I'm so glad you agree." However, Catherine continued, leaning forward, her eyes locking onto Beatrice's. "Your list of candidates is unacceptable. They are relics. They don't understand the speed at which this industry moves. They would be an anchor, as you say, but an anchor that would hold us back while the world sails by." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I will support the motion to appoint a new independent chairman, but I will be the one to choose the candidate. A candidate whose loyalty is beyond question, whose intellect is future-focused, and who understands that in our world, risk is not something to be managed, but something to be harnessed. Beatrice was cornered. To refuse would be to admit her goal was not good governance, but simply to control Catherine. "Who do you have in mind?" she asked, her voice tight. "You'll have my recommendation by the end of the week," Catherine said, picking up her purse. "I will expect the board's unanimous support." A week later, Catherine convened another virtual board meeting. "Esteemed members of the board," she began, her voice ringing with renewed confidence, "I have concluded my search for a new chairman. My nominee is not a former CEO or a politician. He is, however, one of the most brilliant strategic minds I have ever known, and his loyalty to the long-term security and integrity of this company is beyond reproach." A new window appeared on the screen. It was the unassuming, bespectacled face of Marcus Thorne. A stunned silence fell over the virtual boardroom. Marcus Thorne, the Phantom Cybersecurity Chief. "Marcus Thorne has been the silent guardian of this company for over a decade," Catherine stated. "He identified the internal rot that nearly cost us everything. His understanding of our vulnerabilities and our technological infrastructure is unparalleled. He does not care about optics or prestige. He cares only about data security and truth. He is the ultimate grounding force. He will be my anchor." It was a move of pure genius. She had given the board what they wanted, an independent chairman, but had given them a man who was intrinsically, unshakably loyal to her. She had filled the power vacuum beside her, not with a sycophant or a rival, but with a protector. Looking at Marcus's calm, steady face on the screen, Catherine felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the quiet hum of genuine partnership. She was still the queen, still the visionary, but she was no longer alone in the fortress. She was finally on her own terms, building a new court. And so Catherine Delacroix's empire was saved not just by her brilliance, but by her refusal to be a victim in her own story. She faced heartbreak, betrayal, and blackmail, but she never let emotion cloud her strategy. She reminded everyone that in the world of power and money, the game is played 3 moves ahead. Her story is a chilling but powerful lesson. Never underestimate a woman who built her own throne. She knows exactly where all the trapdoors are. What do you think? Was Catherine a ruthless corporate titan or an empowered woman defending her life's work? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of power, revenge, and ultimate victory, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more tales of drama and intrigue from the lives of the rich and powerful. Don't miss out.